Many of Marvel's most formidable antagonists command respect through their conquests of various notable accomplishments and when it comes to doing battle against the Avengers, and many of them rely on their histories to earn a position of authority. Kang, however, is different because each of his variants has a slightly different past. While some are certainly similar, there are various iterations of the character that lead drastically different lives. As more and more incarnations of Kang get closer to making their live-action debuts, we are given clues as to the differences in their characters. Recently, actor Jonathan Majors has given us some insight into how he is approaching the different takes on this iconic conqueror. In interviews, he's explored how the King from Quantumania will differ from He Who Remains, but there seems to be a third Kang that has been thus far undiscussed, and one that is likely to appear very soon. So, stick with us today, watchers of the Marvel Multiverse, and let's discuss how both of them will be different from the variant who is taking center stage in Loki Season 2, and see if we can't identify which version of Kang this entity will take inspiration from. First, if he founded the TVA like it appears to be implied at the end of Loki, then does this simply mean that this is a younger version of He Who Remains? As of now, this seems like a likely possibility, but He Who Remains' identity, especially in the latter years, is inspired by another Kang variant known as Immortus, so which Kang variants informed the early days of this Kang's life? And maybe that will give us a clue at the Kang in Loki Season 2. So which timeline and point in Kang's life will we see in Loki Season 2? We don't know everything about this variant, but we do know a little bit. According to some brand new information, we know that the King from Loki Season 2 is, quote, an inventor in the past, and that he is looking to buy from people who will affect the future. This doesn't leave us with a ton of information, but it does narrow down the potential inspirations for this version, as there are a few variants of Kang that actually fit this description from the original source material. So based on these two pieces of information, let's see if we can't figure out exactly who this variant might be referring to, and what we might be able to expect from this version of the Conqueror. The first of the two options that we'll be proposing today is that this version of Kang is based on a variant called Victor Timely, a small-time robotics manufacturer from Wisconsin, and this seems to fit what we know about the character, and not only He Who Remains' his past, but the TVA as a whole. Let's explain what we mean. Timely, more often than not, flies beneath the radar, and he is one of the least flamboyant of Kang's variants. While several iterations embrace their armies and march against timelines without subtlety or concern, Timely is far more discreet and lives among us most of the time. Confined to a small town in the Midwest, this version of Kang often poses as members of his own family line, and founded a robotics corporation far ahead of its time in the early 20th century. Using his future technology, he was able to grow his enterprise into a generational endeavor, and anytime he returned to the early 20th century, he would assume an identity within the Timely family, be it his own son, grandson, or even great-grandson in some cases, and the Timely identity is something that he has used for years and decades for many lifetimes. We know that the founder of the TVA had a particular affinity for robotics, as he was able to engineer synthetic timekeepers to keep his Minutemen in line, while he himself hid away at the Citadel at the end of time. And while Timely certainly is not the only Kang who had a proficiency in robotic engineering, he is one who seems to enjoy it the most, and utilizes it more often than any of the other Kang variants. He could have created these machines to fool his organization based on previous experience as Timely, before deciding to rewrite the timeline and become He Who Remains. And this would also explain his reclusive nature. There are several variants of Kang who would sit proudly on a throne of gold as they command the forces of the TVA, feeding their own ego and exerting their power over their subjects. He Who Remains, however, does not do this, and is much more reserved than some of the more egotistical variants of Kang, lending evidence to the idea that he might have been inspired by his Timely identity, as of course He Who Remains is not this variant's original name. The second potential option is that He Who Remains lived out the first part of his life as Mr. Griffin, an elusive philanthropist and successful 21st century businessman, and there is evidence to support this as well. First, let's assess the well-known observation that this Kang variant might seem to have bought Avengers Tower. While we do have a full theory on this idea that we encourage you to check out, the long and short of it goes as follows. In essence, the Kang Tower seen in the Void at the end of time seems to be modeled on the Avengers Tower, indicating that this variant of Kang purchased Avengers Tower, and that the tower now belongs to the Kang alias of Mr. Griffin. Since we still do not know much about who bought Avengers Tower in Spider-Man Homecoming, this has led many to believe that one of Kang's aliases was responsible for the sale. as he infiltrated the past and is living in secret throughout the remainder of the Infinity Saga. This would mean that this Kang exists right after the Avengers split, making this one of the easiest points on the timeline to infiltrate without drawing any unwanted attention. It would also mean that this is the version of Kang that Mr. Griffin eventually grows into, and eventually becomes He Who Remains, meaning that he would have first-hand experience on what would eventually become the Sacred Timeline, which makes sense. He Who Remains had to craft a timeline wherein he was never born, and although he might not have been a native to Earth 616, he may have spent some time here and grown accustomed to its landscape while the multiverse was open for the very last time. He could have therefore found this timeline which didn't result in the birth of a Kang, and built the Saber timeline based on the reality where he spent most of his time, thus ensuring that this same sequence of events continued to repeat itself. Not to mention, this variant of Kang also fits the description, that being that he is an inventor who is seeking to buy things from philanthropists who will affect the future, as his corporation is known for their cutting-edge technology, providing what he finds from the 31st century and the multiverse, but he has already been shown interacting with impactful individuals on Earth 616. If he wants to buy things from influential entrepreneurs, he can't do much better than buying out Avengers Tower and closing a deal with Tony Stark himself, the pioneer of the time-space GPS and forefather of the quantum travel technique. People don't get much more influential than Tony Stark, and this version of Kang is specifically described in a way that fits Mr. Griffin. While we don't have any defining characteristics that make one of these variants more likely than the other, there is nothing stating that he can't take inspiration from both or even neither of them. But anyway, my friends and watchers, what do you think of this theory, and which version and variant of Kang will we see in Loki Season 2? And by proxy, could this be a younger version of He Who Remains, or a different one entirely? Is it Victor Timely or Mr. Griffin? And do you think it will pull influence from another variant? And if so, which variant? As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button to assemble and join our team, and I hope that you have a great day.